Rule 20. Work towards the most likely explanation. From a Workbook for Arguments by Morrow and Weston. Since a variety of explanations for a correlation are usually possible, as we saw in the previous rule, the challenge for a good correlation-based argument is to find the most likely explanation. First, fill in the connections. That is, spell out how each possible explanation can make sense. So, here's an example of how not to proceed. Independent filmmaking generally makes more creative films than the big studios. So, their independence leads to their creativity. There's a correlation, sure, but the causal conclusion is a little abrupt. What's the connection here? So, maybe here's a better version of this argument. Independent filmmakers generally make more creative films than the big studios. It makes sense. With less studio control, independent filmmakers are freer to try new things for more varied audiences. Independents also usually have much less money at stake and therefore can afford for a creative experiment to fall flat. So, their independence leads to their creativity. Okay. Next, try to fill in the connections in this way, not just for the explanation you favor, but also for alternative explanations. This is pretty important. For example, consider studies that correlate increased vitamin use with decreased health. One possible explanation is that vitamins actually worsen health, or anyway that some vitamins, or taking a lot of them, are bad for some people. It's also possible, though, that the people who already are in bad or worsening health may be using more vitamins to try to get better. In fact, this alternative explanation seems at least at first glance equally or even more plausible. Finally, try to decide what's the most likely explanation for the correlation. You may need more information. In particular, is there other evidence that some vitamins can sometimes be harmful? If so, how widespread might these harms be? If there's little direct and specific evidence of harm to be found, especially when vitamins are taken in appropriate dosages, then it's more likely that poorer health leads to more vitamin use than that more vitamin use leads to poorer health. Or again, marriage and happiness correlate, again on average, but is it because marriage makes you happier? Or because happier people tend to be more successful at getting and staying married? Fill in the connections for both explanations and then step back to think. Marriage clearly offers companionship and support, which could explain how marriage might make you happier. Conversely, it may be that happy people are better at getting and staying married. To us, though, the second explanation seems less likely. Happiness may make you a more appealing partner, but then again, it may not. It could instead make you more self-absorbed. And it's not clear that happiness by itself makes you any more committed or responsive of a partner. We'd prefer the first explanation in this case. Note that most likely explanation is very seldom some sort of conspiracy or supernatural intervention. It is possible, of course, that the Bermuda Triangle really is spooky, and that's why ships and planes disappear there. But that explanation is far less likely than other simple and natural explanations. For example, that the Bermuda Triangle is one of the world's heaviest traveled shipping and sailing areas, with tropical weather that's unpredictable and sometimes severe. Besides, people do tend to embellish spooky stories, so some of the more lurid accounts, having passed through countless retellings, aren't, let's just say, the most reliable. Likewise, although people fasten onto inconsistencies and oddities in dramatic events, the JFK assassination or 9/11 for example, to justify conspiracy theories, such explanations usually leave a great deal more explanation than the usual explanations, however incomplete. For instance, why would any plausible conspiracy take this particular form? Don't assume that every little oddity must have some nefarious explanation. It's hard enough to get the basics right. Neither you nor anyone else needs to have an answer for everything. All right, exercise set 5.2, identifying the most likely explanation. The objective of this exercise is to give you practice working towards the most likely explanations of a correlation. Here's some tips for success. There's no magic formula for identifying the most likely explanation. If event 1 is correlated with event 2, and you think this is because event 1 causes event 2, do your best to tell a convincing and detailed story as to why event 1 causes event 2. Even better, see if you can come up with ways that someone could test your story about how event 1 causes event 2. For instance, how could someone test the idea that the leaves changing color caused geese to fly south in the autumn? See the model response to exercise 3 for a hint. All right. Likewise, if you think event 2 causes event 1, tell as convincing and detailed a story as you can about how that happens. The more you know about event 1 and event 2, the easier this process will be. If you can't come up with any convincing accounts of how one thing could cause the other, then the most likely explanation may be that the correlation is just a coincidence. Note that in scientific studies, it's usually possible to say how likely or unlikely it is for the correlation to be a coincidence. If the study shows that the chance of a pure coincidence is 1 in 10,000, you may want to look harder for other explanations, besides a coincidence, than if the chance of a coincidence is 1 in 20. All right, here's the instructions for this exercise set. So go back to your answers to the exercises in exercise set 5.1, right? And if you haven't done exercise set 5.1, you're going to have to go back and do it. And for each of the exercises in exercise set 5.1, state which of your possible explanations you think is most likely. Give reasons to support your claim. So we'll look at our sample. There is a correlation between being bitten by a specific kind of tropical mosquito and developing yellow fever. And we'll remember our sample answer. The most likely explanation of this correlation is that this type of mosquito causes yellow fever. According to the Centers for Disease Control, yellow fever is caused by a virus that's transmitted to humans through the bite of a mosquito. The World Health Organization's online fact sheet about yellow fever states that this particular kind of mosquito is a yellow fever vector, meaning that it transmits yellow fever. So presumably it works like this. The bite of the mosquito injects the virus into the human bloodstream. The virus then causes yellow fever. Again, the instructions for this exercise set. Go back to your answers to the exercise in exercise set 5.1. For each of the answers in exercise set 5.1, state which of your possible explanations you think is most likely. Give reasons to support your claim.